So I think we'll go ahead and get started. First off, welcome everyone. I have to say it's nice to actually be doing a meeting in person. I appreciate everybody's flexibility as we change this around a little bit this time to accommodate the group in a room and actually be able to vote on things. So it's very nice to see everyone. And before we get into what's a pretty meaty agenda today, I'm going to turn it over to Grant. We need to there's some new virtual meeting participation policies that we need to go over. So Grant's going to read the policy, and then we will need a motion and a second to actually adopt this as part of our operating policies going forward. So, Grant?
As a quick intro, I'll read through the draft proposed policy in full, but the policy allows individual members of a public body, such as the authority, to join meetings by electronic means for certain limited purposes. You still have to have an in-person quorum regardless, so we cannot conduct fully electronic meetings, for instance, under this policy, but it does provide some flexibility for individual members to join electronically. So I'll read through and let me know if you have any questions afterwards. It is the policy of the Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium Authority that individual members of the authority may participate in meetings of the authority by electronic means as permitted by Code of Virginia Section 22-3708.2. This policy shall apply to the entire membership of the authority and without regard to the identity of the member requesting remote participation or the matters that will be considered or voted on at the meeting. If an individual member of the authority wishes to participate through electronic communication means due to being unable to attend the meeting in person as the result of a temporary or permanent disability or other medical condition preventing the member's physical attendance, or a family member's medical condition that requires the authority member to provide care for such family member, thereby preventing the authority member's physical attendance, or due to a personal matter, the authority member shall notify the chair of the authority member's request to attend by electronic communication means. If the authority member's absence is due to a personal matter, the authority member shall identify with specificity the nature of the personal matter. Whenever an individual member wishes to participate from a remote location, the law requires a quorum of the authority to be physically assembled at the primary or central meeting location, and arrangements must be made for the voice of the remote participant to be heard by all persons at the primary or central meeting location. The reason that the member is unable to attend the meeting and the remote location from which the member participates will be recorded in the meeting minutes. When such individual participation is due to a personal matter, such participation is limited by law to 2 meetings each calendar year, or 25% of the meetings held per calendar year, rounded up to the next whole number, whichever is greater. Individual participation from a remote location shall be approved unless such participation would violate this policy or the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. If a member's participation from a remote location is challenged, then the authority shall vote on whether to allow such participation. If the authority votes to disapprove of the member's participation because such participation would violate this policy, such disapproval shall be recorded in the minutes with specificity. This policy applies to all committees of the authority. That is the policy as drafted.
So Grant, I asked Brandy this question earlier, but just for the group's clarification, assuming we have an in-person quorum at future meetings, for those that meet the policy and need to attend virtually, are they still allowed to vote virtually?
Yes. They have the full rights, if you will, of attendance if they fall within the policy.
Great. So, are there any other questions on the policy before we entertain a motion? Okay. We have a motion.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
And do we need to do a recorded vote?
You can just do it. You don't have to do a roll call.
Great. So, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Okay. Good. So, I think Brandy, we'll talk about this, but I do believe going forward with at least operating under the current conditions as it relates to COVID, we will look to use this facility as much as we can, so we can, for our in-person meetings going forward, so we can have our proper spacing as much as we enjoy visiting BCU, Gary. I think
Parking's better here too.
this will work as well, so. If that works for everybody. But in light of that, I did just want to point out, you know, in this room at least, before we get started, there's the exits on both sides. So if for some reason there is a need to evacuate, I would say please exit through the nearest door, and that'll lead you out to the parking lot. But hopefully that won't be necessary. But just for everybody's notification. And then with that, I think it would be great because we have some new faces and members of the board here, and also some folks joining us in the support capacity. So if we could go around and do introductions, that would be great, and then we'll get on with the meetings.
Bill Briscoe, George Washington University. I'm a member of the committee.
Yes.
Gary Tepper, Virginia Commonwealth University.
Scott Koppel, BWXT.
Gene Graycheck, the American Nuclear System.
April Wade, Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium.
Grant Cronenberg with Office of the Attorney General and Counsel to the Attorney.
I'm John Katz from Central Virginia Community College, representing Virginia's community colleges.
Tom DePonte with Framatome.
Woody Lawman with Flowserve Limitor.
Michael Lemke, Huntington Ingalls Industries.
Andrew Huffman from Jefferson Lab.
Larry Corky, Virginia Department of Energy.
Jeff Fox, University of Virginia.
Sorry, I was just welcoming new members.
Very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tim Suller with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership.
Hi, Eric Olson, Virginia Department of Energy.
Yeah, Jordan Burns, also Virginia Energy.
I'm just a member.
Not just one.
Brandy Fraser, Bethpage, Virginia Energy.
Did you want to introduce yourself?
David Martin.
Perfect. Thanks. Good. Welcome, Dave. Okay, so I don't have a whole lot of introductory remarks. We've got quite a bit to move through today. So in light of that, unless there's anyone else that has anything they want to bring up now, we'll have some member update opportunities later. But I think we should just jump into the meat of the agenda because we've got quite a bit going on here. The first thing is, as many I think already are aware, but the Virginia Energy is leading an effort to look at the decarbonization plan for the Commonwealth. And April, do you want to update? I know there were some comments made by VNEC and others that were put in. Do you want to?
Yeah, I participated in the webinar they had on the decarbonization modeling report that they produced. I listened in on their webinar, and I will say that the report does not talk much about nuclear at all. And they addressed that in the comments because they didn't have any economics on new nuclear. But we submitted a letter just talking about that nuclear needed to be a part and new nuclear needed to be discussed in the state's goal for 2045. I know NEI also submitted comments. ANS, I thought I still think they did. I know several companies. I know Framatome did. I know Dominion participated. So.
Yeah, so thank you. I appreciate VNEC put in comments and also, just so everybody knows, submitted the strategic plan because I think one of the things that was really important that was part of the strategic plan was looking at how do we actually meet these decarbonization goals and including nuclear, looking at the market and you know, kind of how we get there from here. So I think that's an important thing that this plan will hopefully, as they get to the final draft, and would love to hear Al's comments on kind of the status of that. But yeah, there's some question about costs of new nuclear and things like that. But I think it's important that that is included at least as part of consideration and as part of the, okay, let's better understand how that's actually going to work going forward as part of this decarbonization plan. So, Al, I know you're on the phone. Do you have an update on what the next steps in the decarbonization plan for Virginia Energy is?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
The audio is generally good, but I couldn't hear a little bit of what April said, so forgive me if I tread over the same ground. But basically there's a provision in the Clean Economy Act of 2020. The Secretaries of Natural Resources and Commerce and Trade, in consultation with the State Corporation Commission and the EJ Council, to report to the General Assembly by January 1 of 2022, any recommendations on how to achieve 100% carbon-free electric generation by 2045 at least cost for ratepayers. And that report shall include a recommendation on whether the General Assembly should permanently ban the construction of any new fossil fuel-based electric generation facilities. The status of the plan now is that there has been public input received in a number of forums, including a September 9 webinar that was open to the public. And of course, as I believe April mentioned, that comments were submitted by possibly VNEC and Veneca, or at least one of these organizations. And now the report is being written up by, a draft of the report is being written for review by the respective secretaries' offices. And I believe that the first draft of that shall be ready by October 25 for their review. So, did that cover your needs, or are there any questions?
Yeah, I think there may be some questions, Al. I appreciate that. So for everyone's understanding here, the reason we didn't do joint VNECA comments was largely because we didn't have the opportunity to come together for in-person quorum to vote on whether, VNECA we needed to have an actual vote to sign on to those comments. So VNEC took the lead. And having had a chance to review what they were thinking about, it's in line with exactly what we would have put in right on the importance of inclusion of nuclear. So I have a question for Al, but I want to open it up to the board. Are there any other questions about the process or any other steps? So Al, is the plan going to be prescriptive in the generation portfolio to meet the goal, or is it more making recommendations on any actions by the legislature that are needed to facilitate more generation, or like you said, a potential ban on new fossil generation? How prescriptive is the plan going to be, if you can share that?
Well, TBD, and this recommendation from the team, the DMME is leading a project team to coordinate the research and the consultations with stakeholders, both those mentioned in the Act and others. And we will be submitting it to the governor's office, and they will make the final recommendation to the General Assembly. So it in general covers recommendations on, first it provides information that was obtained from these stakeholders and from comments and from some modeling of the generation system and some scenarios that were examined to see what the impacts would be on generation. In addition to that, the recommendation is for any actions that can lead to least cost achievement of the goals of VACIA to the ratepayers. And there's also a call out for that recommendation on whether to continue the current temporary moratorium on issuing a CPCN, certificate of public necessity, for any new fossil fuel generation in Virginia.
Okay. And then just one follow-up, is there, I forget what was actually laid out in the legislation, is there a periodic update to any of these plans or recommendations that is part of that? So would this be revisited in 4 years, kind of like the energy strategy is when the, you know, for the governor's office, or is this just the start, or is this the only one that will be done, I guess?
No, there will be periodic review. I can't imagine that the report will not suggest the need for periodic continued modeling. It's just to keep up with all of the changes to the ecosystem involved in generation of power and changing technology. The VACIA, Virginia Clean Economy Act, of course, includes a lot of milestones by date, leading up to the ultimate goal of 100% carbon-free generation by 2045 for Dominion and 2050 for Appalachian Power. But needless to say, there will be a lot of interim steps to get there. Policy could change, technology could change, and this is really the first look at almost to establish the baseline of, you know, here's what is called for in the Clean Economy Act in terms of carbon-free generation, and here is what the model examined as a number of pounds to achieve that at least cost.
Okay. Any other, Scott, you have a question?
Yeah, you touched a little bit on the ratepayers, and you mentioned, I guess, one item limit is weighing new fossil versus no new fossil. So I'm curious, though, more across the board with how longer-term economic impacts and actually cost and budget data is being driven into the report, or is that to come later? Where is it coming from? Anything you can sort of touch on there. So think of it more as an open question, but I am curious of how they're looking at this in the totality of what's this really going to cost and the cost benefit, and what generations might be, whether it's nuclear or something else, would be recommended, or a mix of, you know, energy sources.
And that question was to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then I believe that all of that will be touched on. The modeling, as all the models, has certain limitations, and the costs of achieving the goals are not calculated by the model, but the model is set up with assumptions that are based on lowest costs known today. But of course it can't predict, except in a very rudimentary way, how the cost of energy storage technology might decline and at what rate that might happen. I think there are limitations there, and all of the stakeholders that have been included have different perspectives on the economies of various strategies to get to the goal of zero carbon by 2050, and to do so while maintaining a reliable grid, and including integration of the technologies that are available now, and probably a look at over the longer term, a look at the mix of generation. The model preliminary findings that I'm not going to go into detail because I'm not by any means an expert on interpreting the model. That's what the team that we are leading, that includes a lot of experts, including Resources for the Future and the UVA, Weldon Cooperstown, and Georgetown Climate Center, to interpret the results and the findings and the information that can be gleaned from the modeling to help inform that least cost decision.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Al? Andrew?
Yeah, just a general question. Was that an easy fit or was it a tight squeeze?
An easy fit to achieve the goal?
Yeah.
Yes, Al, I think that was the part of the question. I'm not sure if easy would be the fully informative adjective that I would use, but the model did show that the VACIA goals can be met, and that it can be met with 100% clean generation. The model cannot look forward but so many years because the findings, the results of the modeling are less reliable over a great distant time periods. But the modeling through, I believe, 2040 showed that the goals could be met with additional renewable energy generation. Other questions? So I have one more, Al. So you mentioned on process here that the initial recommendation from the, let's call it working group that Virginia Energy is leading, is going to be complete, I think you said October 26th, is that what you're saying? So that's tomorrow.
25.
20, well, that's today. So, and then it'll go to the governor's office and there'll be the process and the eventual recommendation goes to the assembly early next year. I'd be remiss if we didn't recognize that there's an election coming up here in the state of Virginia, and regardless, we're going to have someone different in the governor's mansion during all of this process. So is there an anticipation of what that might do in terms of a recommendation going to the assembly, or I guess it just seems to me that regardless of who is the new governor, there's going to be some opinions on what the recommendation should be to the assembly, and it seems like that might delay things. But is there any anticipation of that thus far?
I'm not that involved or aware of the details of the transition. Of course, it is complicated. I will point out that the final report is due to the General Assembly by January 1, which would be before the new administration officially takes office. However, just from observations with previous, we had this transition for 4 years, as you know, in Virginia.
Yep.
There is a lot of give and take between the current administration and the incoming administration in the final days.
Just a clarifying point, on January 1st or thereabouts when the report's delivered, will that be public at that time?
Election coming up here.
Yes.
Thank you.
So if there are no other questions, I guess Al, I appreciate the update. This is very helpful. I would encourage you all as you're finalizing this, and I think this was said in the comments at least that I saw. this is going to be a very fluid situation, all the way, obviously leading all the way up to 2045 or 2050. And I would encourage Virginia Energy, obviously, and the governor's office, the many different ones that we'll see between now and then, to use VNECA, VNEC, the resources in the state on nuclear, because I think they're just like all the technologies, there's going to be a lot of evolution in that term of least cost. So where we can be helpful, please do engage us. We'll do that obviously at our meetings. This may end up being something that we want to have as a regular agenda item on our VNECA meetings, just to check in to see if there's new input that needs to be provided. And then with that, I would just encourage, again, and we'll communicate this in multiple areas, I think, the more flexibility over the long term is available to meet this, this goal, the better. And I would also encourage Virginia Energy and frankly the Commonwealth to use the word clean at its heart of its definition. Right now, most of what I see relies on renewables, and I think this is more my personal opinion than anything, but we're not going to get there if we're only relying on one or preferencing, one resource over another, and not just letting the technology develop as it goes, and we truly do stick with kind of least cost. So anyway, very much appreciate the update. And we'll continue to help provide our perspective.
All right, thank you.
Great. Okay, so yeah, I would just, for this group, I think we will probably want to keep focused on this because I really do think that the demonstrations of new technology in the nuclear space outside of the Commonwealth is really going to have a pretty big impact. I hope some of it's actually going to be happening here too. But I think we're going to need to be a little bit of an information pipeline to the both Virginia Energy, the governor's office, the legislature, to help them understand what's the latest in terms of technology development and cost and all of those things, so that we make sure this is a resource that is captured. So,
can we ask staff to keep us aware of how these conversations are going, and if there's any other opportunities for public comment as well?
yes, that's a good point. I was just going to mention, I think we should put this on as just a standing agenda item for our meetings going forward, just to whatever the latest is. And if there are things in between meetings that we should be engaged on, that would be great if we can get. If we can get things, that'd be fantastic. Okay, so the next step, I'll turn it over to April. She wants to update us on a proposal effort that's been ongoing.
So I've told you over the years that we've been having conversations with Virginia Economic Development Partnership, and those conversations have continued. And as in August, we met with one of the leadership there and with our board, and we discussed the current industry and possibilities with advanced nuclear. And they were very interested in what they heard, and they saw this Build Back Better economic development grant through the Department of Commerce, and they thought that would be an opportunity for us. And so as an industry, we got together. We did it in about 5 weeks. The grant application was due last Tuesday. We put together a proposal, and really the proposal is setting up a foundation to build and manufacture possible a small modular reactor here in the state. The projects include site characterization, supply gap, curriculum, education initiatives, just public education. And the grant wants to focus on areas that have been hit by coal and COVID. So sites that are possible will probably be in the Southwest if the grant happens. The phase 1 for the grant is, we'll find out by December 8th of this year. Phase 2 application is due, I believe, March 15th. So we saw this as just a really good opportunity for us to come together and to put some ideas down. McKinsey helped us put together the proposal. We also had some other writers from the industry help us. It's a really good document. And you know, this may not be the perfect fit with this grant, but I think if we get, it's definitely, and there may be other opportunities for the proposal that's been put together. Did I miss anything, Tom?
I don't think so. I would like to say thank you. There's many companies and organizations on this board that actually had members of their organizations engaged with April, but also big kudos to April. Frankly, this is a pretty big effort on a very short timeline. 5 weeks sounds like a lot, but it's really not when you're pulling together this much effort. So I think, again, it was a very good exercise to try to organize key stakeholders within the Commonwealth to try to think about how do we get our arms around some of this advanced nuclear next generation opportunities that we talked about in the strategic plan that, you know, has really been, I think, a priority for this group. So, you know, well, fingers crossed. I think I thought it was a very good proposal. I think it's got some very appealing things if I were reading it, but obviously biased. So, you know, we'll see where it goes with the Commerce Department. I would encourage you, if you're interested, reach out to April so she can provide you a copy of the proposal. And if you have conversations not only with peers in the industry, but frankly, you know, legislators and others, I think it's a good idea to let them know that this is something that this group and this Commonwealth is focused on. Because I think it's, again, even if it's not this grant, there's going to be future opportunities to bring this type of a consortium together. So
yeah, I really like the fact that we just started with the foundation. I mean, and looking at not just building a small modular reactor, but also how to manufacture and looking at the economic development opportunities.
So Tom, in light of our role, would it not make sense for this group to get a copy of it as opposed to individually having to go to April and ask for it?
actually, yeah, I just wanted to make sure, Brandon, that's okay. But I think, if April wants to send a copy, I think that does make sense. That's probably the easiest way rather than having April. Yeah. So we will do that. Okay. Great. And again, we'll probably have more information about that hopefully before our year-end meeting. And then the next steps, if it's accepted in phase 1, phase 2 will be another sprint. So
it will be another sprint.
Yeah. Okay, so April, we're going to stay with you. This is all kind of in light of, I would say, the VNEC update, because these are all the major activities that VNEC's been undergoing. But do you want to give us an update on the Research and Innovation Hub work?
The hub, putting together the proposal for the hub is still ongoing. Throughout this last year, I've had the university members meet with industry to discuss the needs that for a hub. And so we've been doing that. We've had one meeting with the working group. I did the working group with a draft proposal. We got a lot of comments back. From those comments in the working group meeting, and also because of this grant, we hired a writer to help us put together the proposal for the hub. And so that is ongoing. Hopefully we'll have a draft to share with everybody in a couple of weeks. But it's getting closer. Honestly, I think the grant application helps in some ways in putting the proposal for the hub together. So it's kind of all good timing. We are a couple weeks behind. The proposal is actually due November 1st. We will not make that November 1st deadline, but we're trying to get it done as soon as we possibly can. And the state has been notified that we are running behind.
So in terms of next steps for this group, I think, we've already voted to have BNEC manage the process, which has been fine, which has been great. I do think it would be worthwhile for members of this body just to be able to review and provide comments, even though I think most everybody has a representative that's been, or not everybody, but many have representatives that's been helping as part of the working group effort. So I think the most efficient thing would be to have Brandy provide a report electronically to members to provide comments back, and we'll, through Virginia Energy, to provide that feedback back to April. And then, depending on the next step after that, April, is that the draft would then go to the governor's office for review. Is that correct?
After we get everybody's comments, we'll probably have the working group look through it one more time and give their seal of approval, and then we'll send it to the governor's office or the Department of Commerce.
Yeah. And then the next step would be the legislature?
The legislature. Right. Now, remember, there's nothing, we're not expecting anything back from the state. This is just handing this proposal over. Everything that we do moving forward is on us. So, however, whatever the plan is, and if there's any funding needed for the hub, any of that will be on us to educate the legislators and show the legislature to see what we can do about getting funding, if needed.
Is that clear for everyone? So I just ask that as you see the proposal from Brandy, that you take some time with your organization to provide any comments back. I think, like I said, a lot of this feedback's already being funneled in through the working group, which is great. But if there are any comments further, that you get those back to Brandy and April in a timely fashion, so we can move this along. Are there any other questions about the status of the hub proposal?
The only thing I also will tell you, the writer we hired, she has a lot of experience in putting together hubs. She has a lot of experience in putting applications and grants to the Department of Energy. She has been a great resource for the universities to help us focus on putting the best proposal together we can.
And I'll just add one more thing. I think the timing of this is really great. The current leadership at the Department of Energy, especially the Office of Nuclear Energy, is looking for entities and consortiums like this, not just individual universities or research institutions to partner with. So I know April and I've had conversations with DOE about this concept, and it's very appealing to them. So I think there's a real good opportunity for the state to leverage this coordination, not only with the Virginia legislature, but also the federal government going forward. So I think this will be very, very productive once we're over the finish line here.
Yes. Getting all these reports done this year would be nice.
Okay, so I'm going to change the agenda just slightly. I think, why don't we go to the meeting minutes and just dispense of the past minutes before we jump into those.
The very end, I just think you need to just modify this just so it's factually correct. I'm guessing maybe we're just missing a word here. Parallel also discussed new federal programs such as Energy Department's Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program award. You show the word "and" inserted. And so two separate programs, and $20 million for Advanced Reactor Concept. You might want to add the word "awards" after concepts as well, just to further clarify, since it's two separate sets of awards.
Is there a specific spot?
It's just I think that's actually a paper link.
So I actually had to click on, not on this one, but just a few days ago, the news release that this links to also has backlinks to the previous ARDP award, so you'll get there.
Yeah, gotcha.
Gotcha, okay.
The provisions
so then I guess,
And if you want to leave it, that's
I
fine.
guess
I
we
was
should
just
say
saying,
that makes
are
sense,
separate.
that's not our, it's not our.
They're separate budget line items,
Right.
separate programs, and
Yeah.
separate, you know, sets of money.
So why don't we take a few minutes, so that's, I think the.
So,
our
well, so-
document is relevant, because this is just. an
So just to,
addition.
make it.
Let's take a
easier.
couple minutes.
And because I agree that the ARDP is not what this news release was about. I mean, you can get there from there, but it's not. So how about discuss new federal programs such as the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program, and then put the hyperlink in parentheses?
That's fine.
Because that's really what the discussion is about. That make sense?
Yeah, and then take off the 20 million for advanced reactor.
Well, that's all the title. That, I mean, that's the.
Yeah,
that's the
I'm saying, should we
organization.
should we rewrite that portion? And then put the hyperlink in parentheses after?
Right.
Okay. So why don't we, we'll rewrite it as Scott had mentioned, so the Energy Department's Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program Awards and 20 million for Advanced Reactor Concept Awards. And then let's put parentheses and we'll link to the article. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Any other changes? Okay. And I think, is anybody, I think we're all good with grants change as well? Okay. So can I get a motion to adopt the minutes with changes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Great, John. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Great. Okay. All right. So everyone now has a copy of the annual report draft. This was what Brandy sent out last week as well. You should also have the VNEC update addendum that will be included in the report. So what I would like to do, so we have an update on the meeting held in April, some of the activities related to the hub proposal. We've updated it to include much of still the kind of guiding recommendations that were laid out in the strategic plan, as those are still relevant, even though some are being implemented, like the hub work. And then there's the regular updates for organizations on the board and other key nuclear entities in the Commonwealth. So why don't we still take a few minutes if folks, as I imagine not everybody's had a chance to read through this fully, but if you have, that's great. But let's take a few minutes and you can kind of scan through this, and then I would like, the areas I think we need to focus or would like to make sure we're including is any updates that are relevant for your organizations during the past year, so we're including those, and then any changes we had or additional recommendations you'd like to be including in kind of our introduction and the key activities and recommendations for the legislature. So why don't we just, everybody take a few minutes, so if you haven't already had a chance to provide those updates, we can do that now.